Welcome to part 3. This part needs zero introduction, and all I gotta say is that this part is so action-packed that it doesn't even need an introduction. That said, enjoy.
Hey Ross, sauce it up.
Okay, so we pick our story off in a very anticlimactic type of fashion. Now I know I left the last video off with Deku versus Shinso, and I did that very purposefully because that's pretty much where the sports festival ends. I mean, with other what ifs, I could usually say Deku talks to Shinso and he has plot, or he has like his mental strength is just so strong that he just can't physically be taken over. This time, it just doesn't work like that. Deku this time doesn't have any knowledge of the fact that, well, he's going to use something like that. Obviously, even in the original, when Deku spoke to, Shinso, even though he had like a warning, he still got caught off guard. And I just generally believe that even this Deku that is like a reincarnate of Broly would still like talk back, like even more talk back, just because of the fashion that the nature that Broly has. So what happens here is pretty much Shinso just goes, must be nice to have such a powerful quirk. And Deku goes on to pretty much try to say that it's not as good as he might think, but he's stunned. Like his body is just not moving. Now, I could take this one of two routes. I could take it the route of, since Deku's not in control of his body, it just snaps into Super Saiyan like just crazy, but I just don't see that happening. I personally just see him being able to actually be manipulated and walk off the edge. He still doesn't have the mental control necessary to completely overwhelm Shinso's mind control, so Izuku just loses off rip, and Shinso actually this time gets what he wants and is able to move to the second battle, which is going to be against Todoroki. Now, do I think that he's still able to do this to Todoroki? It's definitely going to be more of a, like, will he even get the chance? Because it's like, obviously Shinso could probably talk smack and be like, I noticed you don't use your fire side, like why is that, you coward? Like he could probably bait him, but I just generally think that like Todoroki is not playing. I think he would just shoot an iceberg at him and just freeze him. That's just what I generally believe would happen. I really don't think Shinso would even get the chance to do that, just due to the fact that now Shinso saw like Deku spoke and he was just GG'd. So I think that that's really how easy that battle would end. And so the final battle would just really come down to Todoroki versus Bakugo. And because Bakugo has one for all, plus explosions, plus he's actually competent, and because he was able to beat him in the original, with Todoroki refusing to use his fire side, I think it's just going to be a way easier one-sided stomp. With Bakugo this time not being like, it's not an overwhelming victory, more or less just laughing at the fact that Izuku was beaten by some kid that is so weak that he wasn't even able to get into the hero course. Like he just holds that over his head and he's just like laughing, having just an absolute blast at the expense of Izuku. Obviously they all get the medals, and then we cut to everybody pretty much being in the classroom picking their internship options and also picking what their hero names are going to be. Now Izuku, when it comes to what hero name he's going to be picking, he actually ends up going with a god, let's just say that it's a Greek god in this universe by the name of Yamoshi, and that's just going to be the name that Izuku generally goes with for his hero stuff. When it comes to who he's going to be going with in terms of like who he's gonna be picking for his internship, I think that he would definitely pick somebody like Best Jeanist, just because he's the best hero that offered him something, and he feels like Best Jeanist is just such a cool, calm, and collected hero that he might be able to learn a couple of things from him. I think that Bakugo would go with Gran Torino because he has one for all, so that means that Deku has absolutely no competition, and he's able to pretty much just enjoy being with Best Jeanist, somebody who has much more of a calm demeanor and is just generally just a great guy. Oh, sorry, I hit my mic. Deku was able to honestly learn quite a lot from Best Jeanist and the internship opportunity that he's given, and I think that Deku would make the most of this, actually learning a little bit more control over his wrathful state, being able to show it off for just a brief instant while, Best Jeanist is able to see just how powerful it makes him. They both obviously brainstorm ideas as to how Deku could control his mind, but it would generally come down to pretty much meditation and learning to control his body and his emotions more and more and more. And that's just what Deku's going to be working on in terms of his strength and, you know, his conditioning and his mental prowess and state. And when it comes to Bakugo, he does end up having to deal with the stain incident. Except I don't think Ida would actually end up getting saved by Bakugo, just because I don't think he's looking for Ida at this moment. I don't think he's there for that. I think he's taking care of Nomu's, and Ida would pretty much be unable to continue trying on his path to become a hero. Because I think Stain would, because he's not a full-fledged hero and because he was going out for revenge, I think that he probably would kill him. But just for this instance, we're going to say that Stain was feeling a little bit nice and just decided to paralyze him instead of kill him fully, right? And that's what ends up happening. So UA goes under a little bit of pressure because of that, but they end up pretty much getting over the hump because Ida makes a public statement that it was his own fault and that, you know, he was vengeful, and if he would have never gone for the hero killer, then all of this could have been avoided. And he did this on his own, and the hero course just, they couldn't stop him because he ran off away from his hero to do it. So they ultimately forgive him, and Ida is obviously publicly stating that UA did not make him say this and that this is something that he did because of his own accord, because he would just hate for the students to have to go under just some trials and stuff like that because of his own fault. So UA obviously continues, and after this we do get the final exams arc, which would pretty much be very, very simple. And during the time of the final exams and stuff like that, Izuku would actually begin getting closer and closer to Uraraka, with both of them establishing a lot more of a closer friendship and them both being seen together more often. This would lead to the students in Class 1A teasing them a little bit because of just the nature of how often they hang out, and Izuku would be fine with that. He doesn't really care. Uraraka's a little shy, but you know, she's not willing to admit that she likes him quite yet. They definitely like each other though. And one day Izuku would pretty much end up asking Uraraka if he can go study at her place. They do so, and pretty much one thing leads to another, with them watching movies on the couch and, you know, kind of forgetting about studying. Eventually they kind of like look at each other, and then time skip, they had a pretty good time. Obviously, you know, they got to know each other and they did what most teenagers do when they're alone. And what happens after this is basically just that Izuku is able to go back to school and feel great. You know, he takes his test, he aces it, and Uraraka feels pretty happy. You know, now they're a little bit more open with, you know, how they feel towards each other. And Deku is able to actually fight against All Might in his wrathful state for just long enough for him to pretty much like not fight him per se, but like kind of like push him out of the way and just like pretend he's in the NFL and he was just trying to like bulldoze his way through. That's pretty much what Izuku did. He just came in, bam, right to All Might's face and ran straight through the finish line. He passes, and then we eventually cut to the forest training arc, which what really does change here. Okay, so they still do have the Vanguard Action Squad because Shigaraki still wants to kill All Might, but this time around they don't exactly try to get Bakugo because it's like, I mean, he's not showing evil tendencies. So this time they're really just here to try to take out the successor, which is Bakugo. So they are trying to kill him this time, not just take him. And they are also trying to kill that kid that gave them issues. So this time they would come in with the Vanguard Squad with a couple of Nomus that they wouldn't have had in the original, and even All For One would be present and part of this attack that would be placed on UA. And because of the nature of how the forest training camp is, I'm just not going to be really paying too much general attention to this part of the story, just because, like, do you guys really want to hear about things that you guys saw in the anime and it's pretty much just constant? I don't think you guys do. So we're just going to be picking this part off where Izuku is chilling with Koda and trying to get him to understand that, you know, like, not all heroes are bad. Cue Muscular's entrance. And when Muscular gets there, he pretty much begins to do his usual thing of trying to talk smack and being like, hey, you know where Katsuki Bakugo is? When Deku hears Bakugo's name, he's like, why do you want to find him? And he's like, oh, I want to find him to make him croak. And after Deku hears that, that's pretty much all he needs. He's already getting angry, and he then looks at Koda and he's like, you killed my parents. And when Izuku just looks down at Koda and just sees that fear and like just that rage that's in Koda's eyes, and that it was Muscular's fault that a kid feels the way that Koda does, this would immediately push Deku over the edge, and Deku would look at Koda gritting his teeth with balling his fist up while looking at him and saying, Koda, get as far away from here as possible now. And Koda looks up at Izuku and he can see that his eyes change color and that like rage is clearly overwhelming Deku. And Kota does not question him. He immediately goes away, and Deku would look at Muscular as he's like, looks like you're also a meathead. Let's see just which one of us is stronger. He comes in and tries to punch at Deku for like a punch clash, but it's over. Deku grabs his punch with one hand and crushes his fist, and Muscular expands his muscles trying to like punch deeper and like try to actually hurt Deku. But Deku grabs Muscular by the head and just smashes his head into the mountainside, and Muscular is just out cold. Like he plunged his head into the wall so hard that Muscular was just knocked out. A bit of his head even caved in. But after this, Deku rushes towards Kota, grabs him and rushes him to Aizawa, where Aizawa is actually now in charge of taking care of him, and Izuku sees that a bunch of the pro heroes are actually being overwhelmed by a bunch of Nomus. This means that Tokiyami and Dupli Arms would have a lot harder of a time to save him, but eventually they would encounter Bakugo and Todoroki, and they would be able to save him, with Dupli Arms having a bit more damage than in the original. Deku at this current moment is currently trying to fight against a couple of Nomus that are there, and he is actually beginning to feel a little bit of sweat, because it's like these Nomus are actually quite formidable, and they're even more powerful than the one that actually punched him straight to the ground at the USJ. So Izuku is fighting them, and he just remembers one thing that Uraraka says to him, that it's basically that his anger is not a bad thing, that his anger could save so many lives because of how strong it makes him, and that if he just learns to control it, he could be anyone's hero, that he's her hero, right? And Izuku, like, once he remembers this moment with Uraraka, he kind of just like lets his restraints fully go, and for the first time in forever, Izuku just screams. He's like, ah! You know what I mean? Like, he lets his rage out fully, and he blitzes at one of the Nomu's directions, throwing one into the air as it like flies up there, and Izuku just jumps up and like straight mouth beam erases it. And then other Nomus like come flying in and they try to attack him, but Deku grabs them by their heads and just bam, ki blast right at their skulls. Like, it just kills them instantly, right? And once he does that, the Nomu's heads just regenerate. So Deku's like, okay. So he uppercuts them and sends them flying up. And then he shoots a eraser cannon at them, right? And this eraser cannon just obliterates those Nomus, right? Like, they're gone from existence. 3 high-end Nomus were just killed instantly by Deku. And suddenly, the rest of the heroes that were there, like Mandalay and the Wild Pussycats, were able to be like, it's incredible, right? And Deku is able to pretty much just jump away and go look for anybody that needs help. This is when he would encounter that one kid that almost got cut by the Nomu that had like a chainsaw arm, and Deku would blast a hole straight through its head, leading to the kid behind it being like, thank you. And Izuku just like flying off, eventually seeing a portal open as he could sense a very powerful and ominous ki in the area. When Izuku senses this, he's like, I've never sensed anything like this. Like, he's genuinely feeling like this might be a bit of a threat, right? But because he's not able to quite literally like fight him or like be that close that like he can see what he looks like, he just has this general idea in his head. He would waltz over towards the direction of All for One, and All for One would begin to pretty much do the iconic evil clap and laugh that every villain does. He begins to tell Izuku that he has been giving his men quite a few problems and asking him if he would be willing to maybe negotiate a little deal between them. 2 businessmen, both of them would make a little deal. He gets out of the way of the heroes and he gets out of the way of the villains. It's something that would help and benefit everybody. All for One looks at Deku and says, hey, look, I know you're powerful, but I know that you're gonna make the right choice, as a smirk would come over All for One's face, but he can't see it because he has a mask. All for One then looks at Izuku and goes, I got a little secret for you, kid. You say yes, your mother lives. You say no, she dies. And Izuku looks at All for One and he's like, what are you talking about? And All for One just says, simple, we've captured your mother. I know blatantly well that you're far stronger than me. And if I was to fight you, well, that wouldn't be very much in my favor. So you quit becoming a hero and die now, and your mother lives. And Izuku's eyes, like his vision it disappears. Izuku looks at All For One and he's so mad he doesn't even have his his sense of reasoning just disappears. Izuku just looks at All For One and can only think kill, kill, kill. It's a moment where he lets out a rage so primal that his hair spikes up and lightning would strike the ground. Izuku looks at the direction of All For One and says, "Let her go," you know what I mean? Kind of like when Paragus died, he snaps into Super Saiyan, and with this power comes so much speed that when he blitzes at All For One and like goes to just grab him and like body slam him, All For One literally gets ripped in half, bro. It's insane how strong Deku is. Could you imagine having Broly rush at you and just punch you like that, bro? It's not normal. Like, Izuku kills All For One, and after he does this, he just continues beating at All For One's bloody corpse just on the ground until eventually other heroes would arrive in the area and they would just look at Deku in his just rageful state and they want to calm him down, but they know they can't, so they keep their distance, and Deku just goes haywire in the forest. He begins to pretty much cause explosions everywhere, ki blasts are flying, the forest is burning, and he's becoming the greatest threat to the heroes as of this current moment. Eventually though, Uraraka comes rushing in and she's like, "Izuku, Izuku," right? Like, she's calling for Izuku, and Izuku's like he can't hear her this time. But she like rushes in regardless of what anybody thinks, and they try to stop her, but she goes rushing in and she like just jumps on Deku and she like hugs him, and Deku is like, "Get off me," you know, he like grabs her tightly and he's about to throw her off. But his vision, like the blurriness slightly goes away, and like hearing her voice call to him slowly brings him back to reason, and he's able to snap out of it just long enough to realize that it's Uraraka and that he was about to hurt her. And he finally, like, his power just dissipates, and like a bloody fist, like he sees it and he just hugs her. He doesn't care. He's like I almost hurt you. Uraraka, through teary eyes, just looks at Deku and is like, "I don't care." And they have like this embrace, and we eventually cut to, you know, Izuku and everybody being in the infirmary, and, you know, everybody just kind of telling Izuku that he was great out there, and, you know, the heroes pretty much covering the situation up for Izuku so that he could continue to become a hero, because All Might was actually the one who would like plead for Izuku, saying that that is the greatest villain that the world has ever known, and that he needed to be killed eventually, that villains like that shouldn't even be allowed to live. So the Hero Commission would allow Izuku to go back on the condition that he never kills anyone again, saying that killing is like prohibited to heroes, and Izuku would understand and pretty much like not be allowed to go take the provisional license thing, so that whole entire arc is skipped. But we do end up jumping into the overhaul arc with Mirio obviously challenging everybody in Class 1A and pretty much saying that, you know, they're gonna have an all-out battle and that, you know, it's gonna be a lot of fun. And it actually is a lot of fun, because Mirio is able to show just how big the difference between third years and first years is. It's so large that one student could actually defeat the entire bunch of them. And Izuku wouldn't have even been present for that, because like I said, he's not taking the provisional hero licensing, so he was busy trying to take it with Todoroki and Bakugo. And because he's there, Mirio doesn't get to meet the strongest character of the, you know, the classroom, but eventually he would hear stories about it. So he would ask Izuku, like when he sees him in campus, ask him to go with Night Eye. And Izuku, he'd be like, "What do I have to lose?" He goes with Night Eye, and because he doesn't have One For All, this means that Izuku doesn't have any prejudice from Night Eye. And this would generally lead to Izuku being able to have a better time than he would in the original, which would obviously lead to him encountering Eri. And what would happen this time is very anticlimactic. I mean, when Izuku sees Eri, a small girl who's completely indefenseless and has literally not even lived long enough of a life to have caused problems for anybody or even become a threat to anybody whatsoever, Izuku gets royally pissed. But because he knows that he can't kill this guy, he just blitzes in and like punches Overhaul. Like, he gives him the craziest uppercut, right? And Overhaul is already like unconscious from that, but then he flies up after him and grabs him by his leg and just bam, smashes him into the earth. And Mirio watching this is like, bro really took the strongest like villain that we've been after for months in like 5 seconds. And Eri just watches Izuku land down like flying, and she sees like a god almost in Izuku. And he just gets down on one knee and he's like, "You okay?" She nods and she's like, "What's your name?" And Izuku says, "Name's Izuku. What's yours?" She's like, Eri? And from here, Izuku just goes on to say, well, Eri, you never gotta worry about that bad man ever again. She nods and they pretty much take her into UA, where finally, all of the conflicts of the My Hero Academia story have been resolved. Even in the original story, we know that All for One is literally the final villain. And with Overhaul being the last kind of quest villain, it's pretty much it for the story. What if Deku was Broly's reincarnation essentially just ends here, and Izuku from here on out just goes on to deal with normal school events, practicing on his abilities that he has and getting stronger and stronger as the years progress. Finally learning to let go of that crutch of not using his anger. Finally learning to utilize it in a good way. And learning about the Super Saiyan transformation, finally achieving it so that, he was able to, live a very, very good life. He went on to become the #1 hero, and eventually after just a bit of time would pass by, Bakugo would finally get over his resentment that he feels towards Izuku, and both of them were able to generally move past that without too many issues getting in the way. That said, that's it, ladies and gentlemen. If you guys enjoyed, leave a like. If you didn't, then leave a like, and I'll see you guys next time. Anyways, peace.